Blog Talk Radio.
What's up, everybody out there in college football land, and welcome to another edition of Quick Slants, brought to you, of course, by War Room Sports on the War Room Sports Podcast Network. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Devin McMillan, and I'm here at the round table with my partner and, by the way, the star of the show. We got War Room Sports college football guru, Fred Perdue, in the building. Fred, what's going on, good brother?
What's going on, sir? We got a nice slate of things to talk about. Scandals amid, and this thing called college football is right around the corner. I'm ready.
It's definitely, the closer we get, the more the scandals heat up. We having big trouble in Little Maryland, the Urban Meyer thing. We're going to get an update from you on that one. And we're going to talk about a few more things in the Power Five conferences. But, it's crazy. But the great part about it is, and we said this last episode, is that we're back, and it's time to do this. All right, so let's jump right into the rundown, because I know the people are here to listen to you spit that knowledge, so that's what we're going to do. All right, so first things first, Oregon and Michigan State agree to a home and home. Now, what's the details on this?
Oregon and Michigan State agreed to a home and home. This is no time soon, 2029 and 2030. I mean, we're a long way, but this is something that a lot of schools do. They schedule games years and years in advance, and I mean, you can't predict what will happen in 10 years. I mean, we have a good distance of time. For all we know, Oregon could be a national power, or they could be on their down days, and Mark D'Antonio might not be at Michigan State by then. I mean, that's a good time away. I mean, who knows? But it's good to
death penalty by then.
Exactly. But it is good seeing the Power Five conferences, the major teams, the big boys, not to throw any shade at the Arizonas of the world or the Colorados of the world, but it's good to see the big boys play each other, especially in the middle of the season when it counts.
That's funny, though, because, it seems like in college football, when they do schedule these type of things, either a home and home or, some kind of series, 5-year series or anything like that, it seems like they do it so far in advance, and then they announce it to the public. They're like, You're trying to get us excited, but shit, I don't know what's going to be happening in my life in 2029, Like, really, like there are some series or some home and homes that you and I may have spoken about 3 years ago on the War Room or something that still isn't even close to happening right now. So this is always a little bit of a teaser for the fans, and you got to sit around and hope and pray that you're going to be around to see it.
I'm more of a look 5 years out kind of guy, where, for example, I look at the University of Miami. That's just the team of my choice. When I look at, they're facing off against teams like Florida in a couple of years. Have Alabama in a couple of years. I've been looking forward to the season opener against LSU for a couple of years this year. So they have a series with Notre Dame over the next 10 years or so. They have teams like Michigan State on the schedule. But those games were scheduled back then 5 to 7 years ago, and now we're just seeing it. And, I mean, who knows? But 5 years is kind of a good range, simply for you kind of have an idea of what if the team is trending up or down. Maybe a new coach is in the cards. Maybe a team, maybe like a Miami is down. I'm just giving a good example. If they're down and they've come back up a little bit, it makes it look good. But right now, you could have Michigan State and Oregon. They're okay, but they're not good enough to win national championships or even compete for them. So
I'll give you even more perspective on that timeline. Like 5 years would be great, like you said, because at least like 5 years out, like from this day, all right, you kind of know who's the top 8th grader in the nation. You know what I'm saying? Like, the good 8th grade quarterbacks. Here's a little perspective. My son just turned 7 2 weeks ago. I don't foresee a future in football, but there's a slight chance that he could be a part of this home and home. We could be talking about this right now, and I could really not give a damn about either one of those teams. But who knows what the future will hold? He could actually get recruited by one of these teams and be a part of this home and home, because that's how far out.
That's how far it is. Yeah.
It's gonna be exactly when he's hitting college age. So it's interesting that they do it like that.
I care a little bit more when it's 3 to 5 years out, only because I follow recruiting. Who cares who's the next? This kid, the next guy is at that point. They're in elementary school at this point.
Right, you don't know who the top second grader in the nation is.
Yeah, we don't care who's in
Florida, but
who knows?
I'm sure he lives in your state, but so he's closer to you than he is to me. But who knows who that is? All right, we talked about Urban Meyer in the last episode. What's the latest on this situation?
Oh, this thing is turned every which way. I mean, I've seen it's crazy how football winning can make a fan base say really, really sideways things. I've seen everything from fans having rallies for this coach and for Urban Meyer, and I'm like, you realize Urban Meyer covered this up. He covered a former coach's transgressions against his wife. I've seen everything from Courtney Smith, Zach Smith's wife, Courtney's mom, siding with him, saying that he was that she wanted to ruin his life after he cheated, and that's what this is all about. I've seen everything from Tom Herman from at Texas being a whistleblower, and he has nothing to do with this. I've seen everything from fans saying Urban Meyer hasn't done anything wrong, and maybe Zach Smith did nothing wrong. I've seen a resignation letter, and I say that, and I know you guys can't see me, but I'm doing air quotes. Resignation letter with him defending himself, lawyers saying he didn't do anything. I mean, this thing is just everywhere, and it doesn't seem like it's going to. The public opinion is I think fans want Urban Meyer to be okay because he's brought them more success than Jim Tressel could ever. And while Jim Tressel was very consistent and a player's coach, Urban Meyer has this outward appearance of being holier than thou, even though he harbored a murderer and guys that smoked a lot of weed, and hey, he did it and there's drugs and all kinds of things in college football, especially at Ohio State too. But it's crazy to me what fans will justify just to see their team win and keep a coach that may be. I'm not gonna call Urban Meyer all-time great. There's Nick Saban and then there's everybody else, but somewhere along in there's an Urban Meyer. But he's the closest thing you've probably seen to just having Nick Saban-ish greatness. So it could get ugly. This thing could get ugly, and we only have a few more days of this whole investigation. It was like 14 days where we had former U.S. attorney generals and different people in the state of Ohio. When you get a committee with people with really long titles, that usually means something's up. And in college football, when there's smoke, there's fire, and I really don't have high hopes for Urban Meyer.
Wow. All right. Well, we will keep everybody out there posted on this story every single week on the broadcast because, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. This is a doozy of a story. Urban Meyer is one of the bigger names in college football, so we'll definitely keep an eye on that. But there's some trouble brewing at Maryland, and DJ Durkin, their head coach, has been placed on administrative leave in wake of the report by ESPN last week that he had created a verbally abusive and humiliating atmosphere at the football program. And this all was in the wake of the death of offensive lineman Jordan McNair, a 19-year-old offensive lineman. The strength and conditioning coach, Rick Court, he resigned after all this news broke. When Jordan McNair initially passed, they were looking into the training staff being at fault. But now, more reports come out and they start talking about the abusive atmosphere that DJ Durkin had created, and they think that that kind of stuff pushes these players to go a little harder than they're supposed to, and it could have something to do with the death of Jordan McNair. What have you heard about this situation, and what are your thoughts?
I think in today's climate of athletics, it doesn't matter if it's the smallest of little league players to high school to college, even somewhere along the lines in the NFL. Coaching, a lot of times coaches tend to get a little bit aggressive, and that may have worked back in, say, 1980. I'll even go back a little further, 1960, 1970, the 80s, the 90s, and then it stopped because after that you have a group of kids that they're a little bit entitled, they're a little bit soft, and this is, for me, sometimes when you may get called something and it's nothing personal, but coaches, the older coaches, they tend to joke around in a way that a lot of times players don't find it funny, or they find it a little bit hurtful. I've never seen anything from DJ Durkin to say, he's a bad guy. I've talked to coaches, and I really wanted to see what he was like. And every account I've ever had of him is just he's a stand-up guy. I mean, he's a former Will Muschamp assistant. So for me, when I see him being talked about this way, and then I see former players coming out, I see former coaches that he's coached with come out, and they all have good things to say. And of course, they're all going to say good things about him. But a lot of times you see you kind of see, you can't fake that a lot of times. You can't fake it forever. Even if it is in the media, you can kind of pick up on certain things if a guy's lying or not. DJ Durkin doesn't seem like the kind of guy that would be very abusive towards players. I think it's a little bit of, players may be a little sensitive, and sometimes some coaches may not know where to draw the line, but to call it abusive and toxic is a bit much.
Yeah. I'm close to the situation, being in that area. I don't know, man. This is, it's always much more serious when a death is involved, especially the death of a 19-year-old kid. Because at 19, we all think we're adults, but in actuality, we're still pretty much kids. So this is another one, that we'll have to just sit back and see what actually happens in the long run. All right, but I got a few things for you here. These Power 5 conferences, we can't stay away from them. These are the conferences that everybody wants to talk about. Where would the show be if we came on here and we talked about Howard and Hampton and FAMU and
hey, not so fast.
Like
FAMU has a D1 prospect. Never mind, I'm going to leave that alone. I'm going to leave that alone.
I had to throw them in there, though. If I was going to throw my own school under the bus, I had to take it down to a Florida school, too. So, that's just how we go. But anyway, talk to me a little bit about schedules. And, give me the team with the toughest and the team with the weakest schedule for each of the 5 Power 5 conferences. I guess we can start with what do you want to start with, the toughest or the weakest?
We can start with the king. I love SEC football. I think everyone loves SEC football. Even if you don't like it, you got to love it because simply it's the closest thing you'll see to the NFL. Not always with the quarterbacks, but pretty much everywhere else it's the closest thing you'll see. So we can go SEC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12, and leave the Pac-12 for last. Okay, so the SEC. Kind of going throughout these schedules, what I like to do throughout the off season, really right after the schedules are really released, I like to kind of go through with a fine tooth comb and just really look at there's a lot of things you have to take in consideration. You can't just say this team is playing this. The number one Alabama Crimson Tide are going to be playing whoever week one. That's easy. But when you look at, you have to take into account recruits, who's leaving, who's coming back, and we don't have all the time in the world to do that. But based off of what I've seen on as far as schedules are concerned, the toughest schedule in the SEC easily belongs to the Auburn Tigers. Just non-conference, we can kind of start there. They start the season with Washington. It's a neutral site game, so it's more like a home game because it's in Atlanta, in that beautiful stadium that the Mercedes-Benz stadium that they just built in Atlanta. That stadium's awesome, right. But it's going to be more of a home game. But Auburn has some issues with
and wait a minute, shout out to that, being on the college schedule, because that means you can have Chick-fil-A in the stadium. That's all I have to say.
Yes, you can have Chick-fil-A in the stadium.
Falcons games you cannot.
Yes, unfortunately, that makes absolutely no sense. You put a Chick-fil-A in a stadium that you can't have it in Atlanta. These are backwards things, but for me, when I look at this schedule, I say Auburn to start the season, they have to see it. They got to face a top 15 team, Washington, an experienced quarterback with a coach that lives for games like this. And Chris Peterson, when he was at Boise State, this is what he lived for: games at the beginning of the year or a bowl game, because he has so much time to prepare and he finds ways to pick you off. Auburn, they're a run-heavy team. They have a quarterback in Jarrett Stidham who he struggled a little bit last year, and he came along slowly. As that offense started gelling, they got better. But when I see this team, this Washington team, they can beat a team like this early. And with Auburn having national title hopes, that's not a good thing. But then you see teams at home, teams in their own division at home, where you get LSU at home. LSU's not the greatest team in the world. They're the defensive side of the ball is they're very stout. They're very fast. They have a very good secondary. But offensively, we always said LSU, they're just an inept group on the offensive side of the ball, outside of maybe 1 year when you had Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. and Jeremy Hill and Zach Mettenberger just making plays all over the field. But that was a one-time thing. You also get Arkansas at home. Okay, they got a new coach. They got a new offense. They're going to have a new quarterback. They're going to be a ton of stats in that game, but it's going to be an empty stat padding game for Arkansas. It's a home game. Great. And then you get Texas A&M. You get a new head coach, quarterback battle. These are all problems you don't want to have against an Auburn defense that's probably one of the best, not only in the SEC West, but in the SEC as a whole and in the country. So, but you also have those games on the road because, you're hosting those guys, but then you get into the meat of the season and you're facing not only the Mississippi State Bulldogs, who have a very potent offense, but a very, very good defense, and, of course, the national champs. To beat a man, you got to beat the man. I don't know if you're beating the man at the end of the season. That's a long way to go, especially, the Iron Bowl is the one game where you can throw all the stats out the window. So, but Alabama, until you beat them, it's hard for me to say, this is just a cakewalk. And Ole Miss is not a team to really take lightly. They just don't have the depth. They have the frontline guys, just not the depth. And crossing over to the East, they have Georgia. They're the only team in the SEC and actually in the country that actually faces both national championship participants in 2018. That's a very daunting task.
Wow.
Yes.
Sounds like a daunting task.
On the other side of things, you got Georgia with the weakest schedule in the SEC.
I was about to say, on the weak side of things.
Non-conference games against Austin Peay, Middle Tennessee State, UMass, and, of course, you have the one Power 5 conference game, in-state rival Georgia Tech. I don't think – and we know what to expect from that option offense. That game's kind of one of those you just don't know type of games, but the way Georgia's been recruiting – the way they've been playing under Kirby Smart, I I'm really confident they're going to win that game, barring any kind of crazy injuries or anything, scandals, anything silly that happens in college football when something like a laptop goes missing or a player gets in a bar fight or something. If none of that stuff happens, I got a safe. It's safe to say that they're going to win this game. In the East, they host Tennessee, Vanderbilt, and of course I still call it the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. They don't want us to call it that, but that's what it is. That's what I grew up with it being called. It's just one of the best SEC matchups. Florida's kind of down, but we don't know with Dan Mullen coming back, you don't really know what you'll get from the offense. You do know what you're getting from the defense. A Florida defense is always stout, very fast, very aggressive. Defensive line is going to be getting after teams. The one game that I see on this schedule that could trip them up. Actually, there's two. On the road, Georgia has to they have to go to South Carolina in week 2. And I don't know if I don't want to give away everything because I want you to go back and listen to the preview show if you haven't. But I got a few thoughts on South Carolina, Georgia, week 2. Go back and listen to that. Missouri and Kentucky on the road. Missouri puts up a ton of numbers week to week, but outside of Drew Lock, I don't really see much coming from them. Kentucky, it's Kentucky. It's another game on the schedule, and their crossover games are at LSU and hosting Auburn. Like we just said, that could be a good old-fashioned Southern hate, as they call it. Very good, very, very good matchup, but easily the weakest team in the SEC as far as schedule is concerned.
Well, listen, do you think that weak schedule can put them back into national championship contention?
It's a double-edged sword.
Schedule going to hurt them?
It's a double-edged sword. You can't lose any games in this situation because there's nobody on your schedule unless crazy things like maybe a surprise Florida team or you gotta hope a team like Florida's good. You gotta hope a team like maybe Tennessee's a little bit better than you expect. You gotta hope that you get to the national championship. You gotta get to the SEC championship, and hopefully hope it's Alabama, and hope you win all of these things have to fall into place. Because if you lose just one game, you can forget it.
All right, no doubt. All right, so let's move on to the ACC. Let's talk about the strongest and let's talk about the weakest.
In the ACC, it was between Georgia Tech and Florida State. For me, Florida State is one of those teams. I know they're going to find a way to bounce back. They just have to get the recruiting there. I really want to leave them out of this because it's kind of one of those things where I need to see something before I can judge them. They need a year to get all of these new guys in. Plus, they have a new head coach in Willie Taggart. They don't really have the. They would probably be for me be on the weaker side of things. So I had to leave them out. But Georgia Tech, they just seem to find a way to creep up into everyone's right now into everything. But non-conference games you get at the University of South Florida. You also have Bowling Green at Georgia, but your home games, your division home games, Duke, Miami, Virginia. Now, when you think Duke, Miami, Virginia, you're thinking, is this basketball or are we talking football? We're talking football. Duke is a contender in the ACC this year, with Daniel Jones being at quarterback, possibly being a first-round pick consideration. Duke is slowly over the years becoming a really good football team. David Cutcliffe has his team rolling. Of course, we know what Miami brings on both sides of the ball. Virginia, they surprised some teams, especially Miami last year, but they may be on the bottom side. That was kind of an anomaly for them. They tend to hang around in games, but they don't know how to finish. Bronco Mendenhall will have to have his team do a little bit better with that. Division road games are Pitt, Virginia Tech, and North Carolina. North Carolina with 13 players suspended, that may be a problem, but Virginia Tech comes back with a loaded roster, and Pitt comes back with Kenny Pickett, who after last year, he emerged against Miami, believe it or not, as a freshman, and he really played well. And he's going into his second year, and they're giving him a little bit more of that offense to pick up. So I expect Pitt to give them some problems, and of course, matchups against Louisville as a crossover. No Lamar Jackson, but Juwan Pass is still there, and anything with Bobby Petrino's name on it, as far as quarterbacks are concerned, I really have a little bit of confidence in. And of course, Georgia, that's going to be one of the tougher games on their schedule. But as far as the weakest schedule in the ACC, it has to go to Virginia easily. Non-conference games: Richmond, at Indiana, Ohio, and Liberty. Nobody but their fans will be watching these games. Home games, you have in division: Miami, North Carolina, and Pitt. Pretty tough there, but for them, it's about for that team to be successful, they need to get early wins, especially to get to that 6-6 mark. They need early wins against these non-conference opponents. You also get Louisville and at NC State as crossovers into the ACC Atlantic Division, as well as coastal road games against Duke, Georgia Tech, and Virginia Tech. So you don't really have a lot of stiff competition, and that's what's going to hurt this team, because they're going to lose a lot of those early games, and they're going to have to really ramp it up with some of these lower tier Division I teams like an Ohio, like an Indiana. Those are going to be games you're going to have to win to get to that 6-6 mark.
All right. So on the other side of things, who are we on now? What conference are we going? Are we going?
We can go to the we can go to the Big Ten.
Big Ten?
We can go to the Big. Yeah, we can go to the Big Ten. The second best conference in football.
The second best conference in football. Many are saying the best, not through consistency, but just the best right now. Weakest. Well, let's start with the strongest, and then give me the weakest.
When I look at strongest, I look at Nebraska. Non-conference schedule, and this is unfortunately for the Big Ten, they tend to not play a lot of big name opponents. Ohio State has been doing it a lot lately, but for the most part, not a lot of tough out of conference opponents. You have non-conference Akron, Colorado, and Troy, but their Big Ten West opponents: Purdue, not me, the school, Minnesota, and Illinois. Kind of easy, but then you get into your road games, and you get into the Wisconsins of the world, the Northwesterns of the world, they've gotten talent. The smart schools, as I call them in college football, are tending to get some of the better talent, especially at quarterback, which is very interesting for that. And of course Iowa. So you have to go to those three. You got to go to Kinnick Stadium late in the year. Not a good thing. And crossover matchups, you got to go to the Horseshoe against Ohio State, and to the Big House against Michigan. And by the way, you host Michigan State. Not an easy road at all for the Cornhuskers.
All right. So on the weak side of things,
I'd definitely go with the Iowa Hawkeyes. Again, out of conference games, not always the best. You have Northern Illinois. You also have Iowa State in Northern Iowa. Iowa State might give them a little bit of, that's their in-state rival. That game is always a bit of a tricky one. Big Ten West opponents: Wisconsin, Northwestern, Nebraska. Not always those games. Nebraska's not the best right now. They have issues at quarterback. They have a new head coach. Wisconsin's going to probably be the best. Wisconsin would actually be the one team that would pretty much decide that division. So that game, if you're an Iowa fan, you really want to watch out for Jonathan Taylor. He's going to rip you apart. As far as Big Ten West, Minnesota, Purdue, and Illinois, not very light competition, and their crossover games. They avoid all meetings with teams like Michigan, Ohio State, and Michigan State. So you get to go to Indiana. You also get Maryland at home, and you get Penn State on the road. So you avoid the big boys for the most part. So you get a chance if you can get past Wisconsin, you might have a chance at a Big Ten West title.
All right, let's take it to the Big 12. Strongest and weakest schedules in the Big 12.
Top schedule for me is easily the Texas Longhorns. Out of conference games, you get Maryland at home. That game in the beginning of when this schedule was released, it sounded like a schedule that could be with Maryland early. Okay, they've had some pieces last year, but now when you have the scandal, you can't predict things like this when these schedules are released. You also have Tulsa and USC. USC this year is going to be having a freshman starting quarterback in JT Daniels, but Texas offensively hasn't been the best. In home games in the Big 12, you have Iowa State. You also have Baylor, who they tend to start the season off well. They're putting up big numbers. They tend to, against Texas, it's always a bit of a shootout. You also have TCU and West Virginia, who both have high-powered offenses. Road games in the Big 12, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, and Kansas. And, of course, you have a neutral site game against Oklahoma. Very, very tough schedule. I think this will probably be decided early. If Texas can beat Oklahoma, and you never know what can happen in that Red River shootout, they have a chance to control their own destiny in the conference.
All right, that's what's up. So going to the other side of the spectrum on the weaker end of the scheduling.
On the weaker side is Baylor. They never play anybody out of conference that really just which always I think everyone's really figured this out now. Baylor plays a bunch of cupcakes early. They go 4-0, 5-0, maybe even 6-0, and then they play real competition and they just go into the tank. Out of conference games, Abilene Christian at UTSA and Duke. Duke might be that Duke game at home, and it may be a very challenging game. I think you might see a nice quarterback duel there. Daniel Jones, I'm really interested to see him this year. He may be, I reiterate this, he really might be a first-round consideration. Not an early first-round consideration, but at least maybe a mid to late first-round option for some NFL team. Home games, you get Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Kansas, and TCU, so not easy pickings. And then in road games, you get Oklahoma, West Virginia, Texas, Iowa State. Those games aren't easy for you, but for me, the early part of the season kind of stacks up well for them. And they have a neutral site game against a Texas Tech team that has not been well. Cliff Queensberry may be fighting for his job. He's 30. If the numbers tell me right, he was 30-33 in his first few years there. Not so great. A long way from the days of Johnny Manziel and running that offense at Texas A&M.
All right, and last but certainly not least, we're going to take it out west to the Pac. Who's the greatest over there this season as far as strength of schedule is concerned?
This is the Chip Kelly show. This team has a long way to go. If you're expecting Chip Kelly to just make everything great for you, it's going to take a while. Non-conference games: Cincinnati, Oklahoma, and Fresno State. They might have a chance at beating Cincinnati, and if they do, of course, all the fans will say, "Oh, we told you so," and then they'll go to Oklahoma and they'll get face kicked in and come back down to earth. Pac-12 South games against Arizona, USC, and Utah, not a good thing. Pac-12 South road games, Colorado and Arizona State. Arizona State has a very potent offense. Hello. And especially with Manny Wilkins at quarterback, and crossover games against the Pac-12 North. You have Washington at Cal and at Oregon. and at home against Stanford. Not a very easy schedule at all. I could see this team. This team might win 3 games, maybe.
Wow. 3 whole wins. All right, so on the weaker side of things,
the Oregon Ducks, and this may be a surprise to people, but Oregon used to play really tough competition out of conference early on in the Chip Kelly days, but nowadays it's filled with Southern Utah, Nebraska, and Wyoming. Not tough opponents at all. Nebraska's a brand name, but when you look at the product on the field, they're not the Nebraska that we grew up watching with the Tommy Frazier's of the world and being led by Coach Osborne. So Pac-12 North games, Stanford and Washington. Also Pac-12 North road games, Cal, Washington State, and Oregon State. Ew. If you lose any game, if you lose anything here, that's a problem. And crossover games at Arizona, UCLA, at Utah, Arizona State. Very, very mixed bag, but very winnable games with guys like Justin Herbert at quarterback, who we talked about in the preview last week, where he's just one of those guys that he has all the NFL talent in the world, and this team will go where he takes them. So, but a bit of a cupcake schedule out of conference, and that usually always shapes how I look at a schedule. How does a team schedule out of conference, and how do they stack up, and as well as teams in their division. As well as crossover matchups.
Yeah, I mean, that can always bite you in the butt because, like you said about Baylor, when we were talking about the Big 12, you can jump out of the gate on some cupcakes at 4-5-0, and then you start playing some real teams, and this is all you're gonna hear every week.
Exactly.
Until you actually do something about it. All right, so there you have it, good folks. That is our show for today. And it's a doozy. Just make sure you take a listen to the podcast and you soak in all this information that we gave you. And there's a few stories on there that we talked about, like the Urban Meyer story, the DJ Durkin situation over in Maryland, that, we're going to check back in with you guys on those stories a little bit later. So make sure you keep it locked into the podcast. Right now we're doing some things on YouTube, both on Fred's channel and the War Room Sports YouTube channel, until we get the network back up and running. So you can look for the show there. You can look for the show on Spreaker as well. Anything else you want to give to the people, Fred? You want to let them know where they can catch you on social media?
Of course. We got a couple here because, you got to make sure you're locked in on social media, everything that's being tweeted out and posted out. You can check me out on Twitter, Fred Purdue CFB on Twitter. I'm always, this is my time of year. I'm always there on the college football, but this NFL thing's about to happen too, so you're going to get a double dose of everything. Also, make sure you check out the Twitter. You can check the show out on Twitter. Make sure we're giving a couple thoughts, leaving a couple polls. We want to know what you guys want to hear. So make sure you check us out on Twitter, at Quick Slants Pod on Twitter. So that's going to be somewhere you can kind of we're going to put out some polls. We want to know what you think, so make sure you check us out there.
All right, no doubt. And, of course, you can check out everything we're doing at War Room Sports at the hub, warroomsports.com. You can check us out on Twitter at War Room Sports, the Facebook page, War Room Sports, everything at War Room Sports. Yeah, so, I know I've been promising it for a long time now, but we're going to get everything back up and running so you guys can hear all of your favorite podcasts in one place. We're still churning out the podcasts, but we hate that we have to tell you to go here to listen to it, go there to listen to it. But, we're back, and everything's going to be back to normal, just like years past, pretty soon here. Just make sure you check out all the episodes of Quick Slants. Make sure you check out all the upcoming episodes of Cover 2 with McMillan and Purdue if you're an NFL fan. And you can also hear us both every week on the War Room brought to you by War Room Sports. You can check the War Room out at warroomsports.com. So, like I said, this has been a very good one. We will see you guys next week. For my partner, Fred, I'm Devin McMillan. Like we always tell you guys at this time, look, man, don't accept mediocrity because there's a lot of that going on in the world. Shout out to the president. But be steadfast in the war against ignorance. Another shout out to the president. The president.
Shots fired.
And we
Shots
will see
fired.
Shots fired all day. And we will see you cats on top. Peace.
Hardee's Happy Hour isn't your average happy hour. From 2 to 5 p.m., double sliders are only $1.25. Call it a charbroiled hour, a double beef hour, a whole lot of melty cheese hour. Call it what you want. Happy Hour at Hardee's is a good call. Offer for a limited time and only between 2 and 5 p.m. Price and participation may vary. Tax not included.
Right now, join T-Mobile and get an unlimited family plan with Netflix included, so you can watch in more places than ever before on your phone, tablet, or TV. Plus, buy one Samsung Galaxy S9 and get one free with 24 monthly bill credits, so you and your family can binge your Netflix favorites on your new phones. Call 1-800-T-Mobile or visit a store today.
Unlimited data on their network. Video streams at 480p. Small fraction of customers using over 50 gigs per month may have reduced speeds. If you cancel, balance is due. Well-qualified customers, full price, $720 plus tax. Finance agreements required. Netflix for 2 screens. Terms apply.